a job, they help the house, all these kids, school fees due. We really, really, for 2 years, really pounded this hard. So we've got some history. Anne-Marie continued with that. And with that in mind, Anne-Marie, just tell us a little bit about where you've come from since those days and why podcasting really resonates for you. And then we'll get stuck into these really cool questions.
Yeah, thanks, Keith. And by the way, we're also streaming live across Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, a number of places as well. And I've checked it, and your voice and other voices will come across loud and clear too. So that works. So hi, everyone. It's great to meet you. And yes, Keith and I go way back to 2008. We're both in the career industry. That was when the global financial crisis hit, and there was so much doom and gloom with mainstream media. Sadly, they haven't changed much. But guess what? We've got the podcasting platform, we've got Twitter Space platforms and lots of other technologies that we can become citizen journalists and share, a message of hope, inspiration, or whatever it is that you're passionate about, your message. So when Keith and I finished Career Success Radio, we did that for 2 years. I continue to podcast in my business. There's multiple different podcasts, but one of them that I've continued to do is Ambitious Entrepreneur Show. But one of the things that I struggled to, and Keith and I both struggled to do this when we were working on our podcast, was how do we monetize this, but particularly with our own message, because both of us were career coaches. So with a lot of trial and error, I've tried lots of different things, love experimenting, as we know that Keith does as well. And I've really found a way that coaches can leverage this technology to build relationships. And that was one of the main reasons why I've always loved podcasting. I'm an extroverted introvert, which means I don't necessarily like going to conferences, but I love to connect and have deeper conversations with people. I'm naturally curious, which I know a lot of us are. And so being able to ask the questions that we want to ask and find out information is the way that I've always leveraged podcast. I've met so many awesome people from around the world, many who I've never met face to face, but certainly have had a conversation either via audio, and now of course we've got video and live streaming platforms. So I've just continued to really use that as relationship building, partnership building, obviously listeners into leads, generating clients from that as well. But it's an amazing platform, and it's gone so far, hasn't it, Keith, over the last 13 plus years?
Look at it. Look what's happened. I mean, when we did our show in 2008, in December 2010, we were sensible and said, look, we've had a go at this for 2 years. We haven't really cracked it. Let's try something else. I went and became the Twitter dude and eventually the Twitter video dude. But Anne-Marie stuck with podcasting, and now she's really recognised worldwide as arguably the world's leading expert on podcasting. And there's several people in the room on podcasting as well. So I'll list those as well, and we'll bring them up later. But with that in mind, Anne-Marie, what do you think about Twitter Spaces as a mechanism now to play this podcasting game, knowing full well that about 55% of Americans now listen to podcasts regularly?
Yes. And I know we had a previous conversation about this, so I'm going to bring in, I can't remember or recall who mentioned that, so please excuse me for not referring to you, but someone said that Twitter Spaces and podcasting, whilst they're both using audio, they've both got unique benefits and outcomes, don't they? And I love to be able to look at, well, what are the best of both of those platforms? Can we integrate them together? So whilst I see podcasting as primarily a broadcasting tool, but you can also build it to build know, like, and trust, or you leverage it to build know, like, and trust, and nurture the relationship that you're building with your ideal client, your audience. I think then Twitter Spaces, because that's more social audio, you can have conversations in real time with an audience. I think that that's amazing too. And so I know that what a number of people are doing, and this is how I really can see it playing out specifically for me, and this is why I'm doing that, because I want to be able to show a lot of my clients too, how can we leverage the two? I love live streaming, so at the moment we are live streaming. I know down the track you're going to open up the microphone and have other people join in the conversation. So whilst we can take information right at the beginning for those interviews and leverage that across the the different podcast platforms, I see the conversation can be used in that way, but quite separate, if that makes sense. So we can leverage them individually, but together create an incredible community of like-minded people.
Yeah, look, we're really honing in on this. It's a year old this week, and we're really starting to play out. But why don't we get to the questions? Because I know that other people want to ask their own questions, but I want to get to the meat in the sandwich. what do you do with Twitter Spaces to record it and to leverage it? Because this is the big pain point people are saying.
Yeah.
I'll share what I do, but I'd love to hear, Anne-Marie, how do you record Twitter Spaces?
Well, at the moment, as you mentioned, I'm using Rodecaster Pro and love Rode. And yep, they're an Australian company, so love them even more. And my microphone is as well. So I'm running that through to my computer and I'm recording that via Audacity. And I'm also recording via StreamYard and the various platforms that is streaming. So, yep, through a Rodecaster Pro and to various platforms, including Audacity.
Brilliant. This is really, really important. So, Anne-Marie, this is powerful. Anne-Marie has found a way. First test today. You're hearing it first on Virtually Unlimited Audio. Anne-Marie has found a way to link Twitter Spaces to StreamYard. Look, we've been trying to work this out for ages. Anne-Marie's done it. She's running an experiment today that is running to Twitter and Facebook as a secondary site. And she's also using a little device called a Rodecaster the size of an iPad that records in natively on the unit, which will turn into a lovely, rich media file, which she can then repurpose. This is actually a really important question that I've been asked many, many times, so I'll just run through how I do it, and then we'll go to the second question. Most importantly to remember is that Twitter does record these for you, so you can actually ask for this. It's a really, really cumbersome process, and I don't recommend it, but if you want to, DM me and I'll tell you how to do that. Twitter does record these. And you can request that. And eventually everyone will get the recording feature, but you only get the file for 30 days and then it disappears and you don't actually get to own it. It just sort of lives on Twitter and then goes away. And thirdly, the quality is actually not that good. But it is possible to do natively on Twitter. What I'm doing is I'm recording using a site called Headliner, which you have to write this down. If you haven't heard of this site, you have to try it today. Headliner.ai. It records the show, gives you the transcript, and also has a bit of tech in the background to create snippets. I still haven't worked out how to do that yet, but I'm going to. So you've got 3 for 1. You can record the show, you get the transcript, and you can record some snippets. It's a third-party site. I'm trying that today. So anything you see that comes from my feed will be based on that idea. So that's the first thing. How do we record? The second question that a lot of people ask is, once you've recorded the file, Anne-Marie, how do you edit it? How do you edit your Twitter Spaces session?
So now that it is recorded on Audacity, we will edit in Audacity. And I know that for Mac users, you've got GarageBand. I know there's a number of different platforms you can use to edit, but I primarily use Audacity. It's a free source, isn't it? You can download that as a free resource, and it's got all of the functions that I need. Anything too complicated, not, that kind of a little bit too over the top, but this has got some simple features enabling it to be edited quite simply.
And do you do it yourself or do you outsource it? Because I know you're a big fan of outsourcing, which saves you buckets of time, right?
Yes, so both. I do have editors who edit that for me, but if I'm working with a private client, I'll tend to edit it myself because I'm not just editing for audio quality, I'm also editing the conversation because sometimes the conversation, is important. Yeah, what you edit out really makes the conversation sharp and, compelling.
So you use Audacity.
Yes.
Mac users can use GarageBand, and you can also outsource it. What I use, I'm really proud of this. I use a site called Filmora, Filmora. It's actually a video editor, but because I'm quite good at it, I just turn that part off, and then I use the sound component. It's got a really diverse sound component. And why that's great is because Audacity is an audio-only product. You can't add video. Whereas with Filmora, I can export the show as either a video or an MP3 audio. So I use Filmora to do my editing. So anything you see that comes from me will be that. Anything that Anne-Marie does will be Audacity. But you also use Headliner.app, don't you? The actual more generic Headliner shot. How does that work?
Yes. So that comes in with the marketing. That comes in with the marketing, because you can also cut out snippets and use different, size or length snippets to share across different platforms. You can also put captions on using headliner.app as well. Not necessarily for the recording and editing, but certainly for editing little snippets for the marketing purposes.
Very cool. And we just heard today, this is hot off the press. I just found this out about 15 minutes ago. Twitter is now adding captions to their videos. I just found this out today. So any videos that I now do from today onwards will have captions embedded in them on Twitter. I'm still experimenting with how that's going to work, but that's a win, because we all want our stuff to be accessible. So that's the second question. The third question a lot of people ask is, well, where do you put it? Once you've actually edited the file, where do you put it so that it can actually be hosted and transported? So the question is, where do you host your Twitter Spaces or podcast file to take it up a notch and take it out further?
Great question. So I remember a mentor of mine when I first started my business always said, be mindful about where you build your brand, your reputation, your assets. And so I use and have always used blueberry.com. They are a paid host. Libsyn is another one that I haven't used, but I have heard lots of great things about that. And the reason I say that, there are free hosts and then there are those that charge various packages. And the reason that I'm mindful about where you put all of this incredible content and where you build your community and your assets, be mindful that if it's on a free third-party platform, what happens if they close you down? So whilst they've got all of the bells and whistles, some of these free, I mean, you can use Anchor. There's a lot of others that I know that others have spoken about as well. Just be mindful that you don't own, you own the content, but you don't own the platform upon which that content is being shared. And if they suddenly disappeared, what happens to the content then? So that's just something to consider if you're doing your podcast for business purposes to build your business.
It's a very, very, very good point, because when we did our Blog Talk Radio show, one of the things that we always came across was that we don't own the content. And we did Blog Talk Radio provided this wonderful platform, which we thought was a fantastic deal at the time, because we could create content for free and they send it automatically to iTunes. We had a lot of trouble repurposing it, didn't we? This is probably the fundamental lesson we learned from Blog Talk Radio, isn't it?
It is. And also too, I mean, if the site went down or we couldn't access it for some other reason, it closed down the entire thing. There was no other place that we were really sharing our content. So,
yeah. And so that's a really important point.
Yeah.
What I will say, Anne-Marie uses Blueberry, BLUBRRY. She also mentioned a site called Libsyn. What I personally do, and I love it, is I use a site called SoundCloud. It's one of the older ones, soundcloud.com. The reason I use SoundCloud is because it looks lovely inside a tweet. In fact, it looks so lovely, Twitter really seriously considered buying SoundCloud a number of years ago. They ultimately decided not to buy it, but they seriously considered buying SoundCloud because it looks so lovely as an embedded tweet. Just fits within the Twitter ethos. Another site you could use is Spreaker.com and another site called Podbean. There's actually hundreds of these, but we'll open this up to questions to see how other people are doing it. The other thing you could use is Anchor. Anchor.fm is now owned by Spotify. A couple of advantages there. One is it's owned by Spotify, so they're going to give you some kudos. Second of all, it's completely free, so it's a good cost-effective option if you're just starting. But as Anne-Marie said, be very, very careful about using free sites all the time, because first of all, they're probably going to put ads on, and second of all, there's a whole range of other restrictions that might come from that. You want to have complete control of your file. And so we'll talk a bit more about this in the Q&A section, and we are turning this into a blog post, so please bear with us and DM me if you want the link to that. The fourth question, which I want to spend a bit more time on because this is the one that everyone asked me more about, is, okay, you've recorded a podcast, possibly using Twitter Spaces. You've edited it. You might have done that yourself. You might have outsourced it. You've sent it to a podcasting host and your podcast's up and ready and willing and waiting to go. How do you promote it? How do you get people to listen to it? This is the big one. Tell me how you do it, Anne-Marie, and just give us a couple of teasers, because I'll share some stories, and then we might launch into Q&A after this, because
Yeah,
it's a big
absolutely.
story, isn't it?
It is. And, one of the things I've prepared a couple of things to respond to this question, because so often we think about marketing and promoting our podcast and Twitter Spaces after the fact. Now, there is so much opportunity to begin marketing, creating a buzz, if you will, before the Twitter Spaces goes live, before your podcast live streaming goes live. And I know that you do that incredibly well. So I just want to share, think about marketing and promoting beforehand, during, and then after as well. And then once you identify some key things that you want to do, just continue to do those, get them to working till they're working really well, and then continue to expand so that you've got lots of different things. Because if you try and do too many things at once, you end up getting overwhelmed. So if we just couple of things before, you do this really well, Keith. You create incredible videos, little snippet of videos, the questions, and then the videos, and then you share that to your community. And that's what you can do if you're interviewing a guest. Let them be tagged so that they can share that with your community, because then you're going to have people who are wanting to listen there, listening, watching, but then also able to interact with you during the live Twitter Spaces. So continue to do that. Use all of the things that you're already doing too. Share within your communities across different platforms, tag people that may be interested, reach out to even people who may have inquired about your services and invite them along as well. Your list, all of that is really good. Then during, this is one of the things that I think Kiki did, is to do a wave. What do you call it? Not a wave. Is it a wave?
Okay, a waterfall.
A waterfall. That's right. You can do that and continuing to tweet and things like that. And you may also have a team member who's doing things behind the scenes too. Because I don't know about you, Keith, but I've kind of really making more focused on the conversation, rather. If I'm doing too many things at once, I think the whole lot can fall down. So the during is probably a little bit more limited for me. But then the after, let's get into what some of the things that I do. So I do now have a team that does this, but they take the audio file, and my editor creates audio snippets. And then another part of my team creates graphics on Canva. And then another person on my team puts those together in Headliner to create those audiograms and those captions and things like that. So that's what we create and prepare, and our guest also gets access to that content as well, and we continue to share that. But then another member of my team transcribes it, and that becomes a full transcription. It becomes very comprehensive show notes. It becomes a workbook. It becomes email copy. It becomes different snippets of different sizes across the different platforms, and then that can continue to be shared across different platforms, quotable quotes, audiograms, infographics, all those kind of things there. And then we continue to use those snippets across all different platforms. You get your portrait, you have your landscape, and then you also have the square, which is typically used for Instagram platform as well. One of the things that we do is we timestamp the conversation in the, the comprehensive show notes as well, because what you want to do is you want to make it as easily consumable for the people who come along, and we do highlights. So someone may come along and then look at the highlights and go, you know what, this show is really good, and then dive into that. And so bite-sized pieces to kind of compel people into wanting to know more. But those are kind of the things that we do.
Snackable content.
Yeah.
It's what you've said there is absolutely the essence, And just to let you know what Anne-Marie was alluding to, in the nest, the first tweet in the nest, Kiki, who's on the call, and I'm going to bring her in a minute, created a lovely video using Canva. The 4 questions that we've asked here in this call were put together in a compelling little video that went 30 seconds. I then sent that out as a tweet on Friday, true story, and it's had 3,200 views. So 3,200 people now know that this show is on and that we're doing this stuff. So we're running our own case study. We are running these shows. We're doing them regularly. We're telling people that they're on in advance. We're scheduling ahead. With Twitter Spaces, you can actually schedule 2 weeks ahead. And there's another tweet in the nest for next week already. I'll schedule that actually at the end of the show, which will create an actual link. But we've got in the nest a show, Discover How to Use Social Audio to Build a Global Community. That's coming up next week, same time, same channel. So we're chatting now, but we're also informing you that we've got another one. So this is sort of very meta. We're talking about our show, and we're also preparing you for the next one, just in case you want to come back. So, Spaces as a viable podcasting creation tool, because if you're not using Twitter Spaces, you've got to record it separately on, Riverside FM or Squadcast FM or Zoom or Teams or Google Meet or whatever, and then you've got to upload it. But with Twitter Spaces, which is just about to start, we've got an automatic inbuilt community. And with that in mind, they are indeed the 4 questions that we wanted to ask, and we will turn that into a blog post. We promise you we'll do that. If you want to know more, just simply go to keithkeller.com.au. The tweet is already, the essence of the blog post is already there, and tomorrow it will be finished. It's on the homepage, how to turn Twitter Spaces into podcasts. It's right there with a big microphone. So please go and have a look at that. But with that, first things first, I want to give a big round of applause to Anne-Marie with my new gadget. So Anne-Marie provided massive value. So I want everyone in the world and everyone in the room to actually do a big 100, which simulates a standing ovation. And with that in mind, Anne-Marie, are you open to taking some questions from the audience, or do you want to just wrap up what we've said there before we do that? You want to just bring it all together?
Yeah, I think what you just everything that you've been sharing. I mean, often with new technologies and things like that, you want to find out from, as a business owner, how can I integrate with what I'm doing already, things that you've already built momentum with, which is why I'm kind of leveraging this across the live streaming platforms as well. Recognize where are you best able to use that, because I think one of the things, Keith, that we got feedback from many of our colleagues when we first started podcasting is they thought that it was a bright, shiny object. Now, if we didn't have a purpose and intention on how we're going to leverage that, how we're going to repurpose that, how we're going to streamline that, then it certainly would be. So, if you're a coach who's listening to this, there are some incredible ways that you can leverage, and I'm sure we're going to open up for questions and find out how other people are leveraging it as well. It can be an incredible tool. Maybe just spend a little bit of time in finding out how best you can leverage it, because then once you do launch, you can hit the ground running. So that's probably the one thing that I would say before we move on.
Yeah. Well, you've really provided an enormous amount of value right in that first half hour. And I think this is going to be the new format for me, because we're front loading the value. What that means is that if you have to go as the guest, because we're very busy and these things can go hours now, we're actually talking. Hang on, mate. So what we're going to do now is we're going to open it up to questions, but I want to start with my two special guests. One is Kiki, who did the wonderful graphics. You've heard the essence of that story, Kiki. I'd love to hear a wrap up from you on what you think was the essence. Well, we haven't yet made the dashboard, so I'd love to do another waterfall just to pick up on the marketing idea again. But Kiki, I'd just love to hear your thoughts on what Anne-Marie said there from your, to just review it and get the essence there.
Anne-Marie is wonderful, and you guys have been working together for such a long time, and using the deck has been wonderful, and there is another one for 2022, App for Works, how to create a global community using Twitter Spaces. And what Anne-Marie, I like what Anne-Marie said, that you need to be very careful on how you record and the proprietary value or out there, and how you can manage that and market it further, and being able to use it and reuse it and keep it for yourself. So
Yeah.
I really like. I think they're very valuable when you consider the length of your work, because what you guys have created, you and Anne-Marie together, this is your portfolio, right?
Yeah.
So as myself, as a teacher, I create a digital portfolio. You guys have created an audio portfolio.
Wow.
Which in the future you can use. How do you think of that? Right?
Well, let me pick up on what you
that
said
makes
there.
sense, right?
We did Blog Talk Radio every week for 2 years. We have 108 shows still on iTunes. That still has. It's going to be very hard for me to top that as an achievement in my lifetime. You know, I did a show every week for 2 years, and it's still on iTunes. Career Success Radio. You can Google it today, right? And that will live forever on the internet as, in a way, my legacy. So everything that we have done since then, since 2010, has been to top it, to better it, to make it better than it was. The sound quality was almost, unlistenable. I couldn't probably listen to it now, but at the time, it was the best there was. And so what you've said there is unbelievable, Kiki. We've got a portfolio in an audio format of what we stand for. At that time, we were career counsellors teaching people to get a better job. You still have to pay the mortgage, but you don't have to go to a boss that you hate or a job that's horrible. Try and find a balance. It was a great show. I'm so proud of it. We got interviewed all over the world. We got interviewed in China. Still have that DVD on my shelf. Got interviewed on Chinese TV with subtitles. Quite funky. So, but what I'd love to do from you is I'd love to hear how you did these videos, because it didn't take you very long, but look at the leverage we got.
Yes.
Tell everyone how you did it and how you can do it for them if you want, or if you want to teach them how.
Of course, I can tell everyone how I did this. I'm a Google certified educator. I have many certifications. So one of them is I'm Google certified, and I have been working with Canva for a while, and I dropped because the problem with Google Slides is that you cannot download the image that you create as a GIF. Although you can make it into a GIF, you cannot download it as one. So what Canva has very cleverly done, it allows you to download what you create as a GIF, and it moves and it looks so funky. So I created the whole entire slide. Keith one day said, "Oh, do you want to work on this?" And I said, "Sure," but it was a Thanksgiving weekend. And I said, "Okay, I'm going to do it Saturday." Saturday passed. I woke up Sunday and I said, "Okay, I'm working on this." And I I said to Keith, "Give me your email." Keith gave me his email, and I put him on the deck as a collaborator. And he was seeing me as I was creating this, and it took me 10 minutes, Keith.
Yeah.
Correct, 10, maybe 15. I don't want to oversell myself, but it was very fast. And it looks very concise, because I value as an educator the essence of an empty space and not overwhelming images. How the title needs to sit, so for the audience to be able to visualize it and be easy to read. So because when I did my master's, these were part of my training. I did curriculum training, and we actually learned how to create our own curriculum and use books and how that would look like when you create a curriculum. So this is what I use, and my recent training as a Google certified educator, and I put it all together, and it just took me a few minutes because I knew what I wanted this to look like, and I knew what I wanted it to represent.
The few minutes that it took you was really represented years of training.
Yes, correct.
I remember Dave Stewart from the Eurythmics. You may not have heard of this song, but Dave Stewart from the Eurythmics wrote a song for John Farnham, who was sort of like the most famous person in Australia at that time. And he braggingly said, look, Chain Reaction was the name of the song. It went to #1 for like 20 weeks in a row because everyone in Australia loves John Farnham. And he said, oh, look, it took me 10 minutes to write. I was on the bus. And people were saying, mate, you wrote a song in 10 minutes, made $1 million. I said, yes, but I've been playing guitar for 27 years. Right? I didn't just pick up the guitar and write it in 10 minutes. I've been playing guitar for 27 years, and I just happened to be in the right headspace to pick up the guitar, and the song came to me. This is exactly what happened to you, isn't it? You know, it only took you 10 minutes, but you've got history, yeah?
Exactly. And it's what I believe that the audience wanted to hear, what I know from you as a host in Twitter Spaces. So I just wanted to portray that through everything that was happening, because in the creation, I wanted to say a million things without saying anything. And that is the power of an image, right? Imagine a moving image, a GIF. So that's what it is. And then when you see it as a slide deck, it all comes together because it moves and it's super fun.
Yeah, and all the thing I love, and I really want to pick up on this, I'm going to start doing a thing called Stats and Chats. So I love stats. I can tell you exactly how many people have listened to it and how many times they've listened and for what length, and etc. But what I also want to do is I want the show to live on. The thing that I don't like yet about Twitter Spaces is it's ephemeral. When it stops, it stops. I want it to live on. So with those videos, we know for sure what the show's about. There's four questions. You know that when you come to this show, we're going to talk about these 4 questions and others as well. So it was an incredible hack. It was just I'm so proud of you, Kiki. I mean, I can't wait to see what you'll create. Well,
thank you. For 2022, I haven't even opened it, but it's going to take me another 10 minutes probably. Yeah. But it's going to look amazing. I can promise everyone that.
Yeah, and if you want to know what we're talking about, we're already pre-programming a show for next week called, it's in the nest there, Discover How to Use Social Audio to Build a Global Community. You can't actually schedule more than 2 shows at once, so I'm going to have to do that after the show finishes, but Kiki's going to work on another GIF for me. But with that in mind, I'll bring in my other co-host, Indra from LA, an Aussie actually living in LA. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what we've chatted about so far, Indra, especially what Anne-Marie was saying there, and also Kiki with her unbelievable videos. What do you think will happen with Twitter Spaces as it relates to podcasting? Do you think it's a viable option to what you've been doing so far?
First, I think it's really a fun, interactive option, Keith. And I say that because with podcasting previously, and I'm sort of saying podcasting / YouTubing for anybody that knows that I have my YouTube channel, which is also people refer to as a video podcast. But also since I've been doing the Twitter Spaces and having guests on that, this is just a much more interactive medium. So this is what's really exciting for me, is that you're doing things in real time, you're broadcasting live, and at the moment, crossing over to what Anne-Marie's doing, she's able to then connect everything so that we're live streaming out as well, which is incredible. Interactive mode from all the listeners who can ask questions, comment, share thoughts. This is just a whole nother level of podcasting that is a whole new definition, I think, as far as it doesn't exist in other mediums. I know occasionally, like I've done a live web stream using Riverside FM, interviewing a guest, and then somebody else could call in. But still, there's no way that you could have, I could have all these people here listening live, but also have the option for them to ask questions. So this is just a whole nother level for me that I love the idea of. Some things that Kiki has been doing, I've been watching progressively, and liking all of those tweets and seeing those evolve, and the marketing power on that is incredible, because yes, you are giving it life in this moment, and then things will just keep living on. So that's an amazing medium as well, what Kiki is doing, and I think it's really powerful. We are such visually stimulated people, and we're so spoiled with all the different platforms we have. But even what Kiki's doing, I could see that could be utilized, across other platforms.
Yeah.
Social media, right?
Well, the thing that you've said there is really interesting. That there's a couple of things going on there. One is the engagement. After Anne-Marie and I sort of split up, if you like, the Beatles split up in 1971, but they were still mates for a while. Some of them weren't mates, but some of them were still mates. We split up. The band broke up in 2010, and Anne-Marie went off to do podcasting, and I went off to do Twitter. Well, I went off to do Twitter video, and I ran a show on StreamYard every week for years. Never, ever have I got this much engagement, this real-time engagement. So we're on the call. There's 20 or 30 people on the call. They can ask questions. They can talk to each other. They can DM each other. They can follow each other on Twitter. It's a miracle. And, with that in mind, put your hand up if you want to speak. I'm going to open it up to the whole group now. So we have already several speakers, so I might just run the room with who we already have. But Pixie, why don't you jump in and tell us what you think of what we've chatted about so far as it relates to what you teach and what you know.
Every time I'm trying to make a massive tweet, I always get called up. But Twitter Spaces has been this fantastic social audio, and there's just so much that can happen with this. We are on the first year of Twitter Spaces, and this is the time to start thinking and building your Twitter space in a way that's productive and that builds a community around you. If you can start using, even if you have only 100 followers, that's the beauty of these Twitter Spaces, is that Keith can hold it, Kiki can join, Billy can be here, Ruth can be here. All of these fantastic faces can just show up because we decided that that's what we were going to talk about. And if you don't see what you're looking for in a Twitter space, you can always create it. It's so beautiful. It's so interesting that in 10 years from down the road, this could be huge. We could all have millions of numbers of followers just because
this could be the next YouTube,
new.
couldn't it? This could indeed be the next YouTube.
Totally. Yeah, it's interesting to see how we're all going to develop, and we'll lose a lot of people along the way, but we'll gain a lot of people when we onboard new followers and just work one-on-one guiding people into this space. I like it.
Yeah, it's all brand new. Any last thoughts? Because I'll throw to Ashley and we'll keep the conversation moving.
Throw it to Ashley.
So, Ashley, what do you think of this? You've been fairly new to Twitter Spaces and you've come to some of mine. What did you think of what we've chatted about so far and the potential for Twitter Spaces moving forward?
Hi, Keith. I'm kind of flabbergasted by the amount of interaction and growth that I've experienced since joining Twitter Spaces. As someone who has had an account since 2009, and for the most part it's lied dormant, or I've only interacted when there have been, major occurrences happening or someone drew me to the platform, I have been not only glued to my phone, but given the opportunity to amplify my voice as, an individual, personally, professionally, and potentially bring new users into the fold, which is what pretty much every platform wants and every creator wants. So everything that everyone has brought up, I still feel is scratching the surface of the capabilities that can come out of Twitter Spaces in this new era. I wanted to continue along with the conversation that you were starting. Well, I guess it was the ending thought that you were having about people and how they can connect with each other while in spaces. I've seen recently tweet threads and content created out of live moments that ultimately catapult other people's careers because they're able to take in this information, react in real time, and turn that into content that is, like everyone is already talking about, able to be repurposed on every platform that's available to them. It sparks, people's imagination. It allows them to engage where they're most comfortable. So I feel like there's even more freedom in the experience of being a Spaces listener and a Spaces user. And I know personally, I wouldn't be able to talk with as many amazing people at one time if it weren't for the platform. So
Yeah.
I'm
Have you seen
humbled
anything
and
like it?
grateful.
Have you come across anything similar?
Nothing like this.
Yeah. Look, let's pick up on what you just said there. So Twitter Spaces is a thing. You can communicate with everyone on Twitter. You can have these really fantastic conversations, and you grow your own network while you're doing it. I can tell you for sure, and we're very excited about this. We've made the Twitter dashboard. It took us a while, but we made it. We've now got our random 30 people on the call, and the speakers that are currently on the call have a collective following of 62,000 people. Now, my highest score so far on these stats, the stats and chats that I'm starting to do, is that on one particular show, we had the potential to reach 820,000 people, and on that particular call, 995 people actually came. So we had 1,000 people on the call throughout the course of a 2-hour chat, chatting to each other and meeting each other and meeting new friends and all over the world, which is exactly why next week I'm running this show called How to Build a Global Community. So this is pretty exciting stuff, isn't it, Ashley? And you're experimenting with some of those GIFs and images too, aren't you?
Absolutely. I have taken to this like a fish in water because I love the visuals. I love bringing in new people, and I love trying to engage people in different ways. So yes, I've tried the GIFs or the GIFs. I'm going to take that a step further and actually connect with the Jiffy account. So see if I can further my reach that way. Create some Spaces graphics for Instagram, perhaps, or I guess whichever places Giphy is available. I feel like it goes into text messages as well, which is a really great opportunity for direct messaging and marketing in a different way. I am 100% on board with doing a Twitter Spaces about how to do, incorporate graphic design. Count me in. I'm in love with the idea, and I want to figure out how we can extend this because I feel like there's more ideas as we come together.
Well, as I said, Twitter Spaces Day, this is not my product, it's not my idea, but I want to promote it. Spacesday.com is on this week. Twitter is 12 months old this week, and we're all discussing ways in which to leverage it more. And so there's a whole heap of Twitter creators on that day. So please go to that event. I won't be speaking, but I'll be helping out from behind the scenes. The wingman, I call myself there. I love doing the stats. I love sitting behind the microphone as much as I love sitting behind my PC doing all of the wizardry. Look, let's keep the room moving. We've got quite a few people in the room, and I'll work through them sequentially. Put your hand up if you actually want to speak ahead of the sequence, because we have plenty of people on the call. We've made the dashboard, so now the whole thing lights up for me. I want to bring Billy in because Billy comes from a voiceover radio mindset, and I'd love to hear your thoughts, Billy, on what you think Twitter Spaces could be, and does it fill that gap in the podcasting world, or will it be just a flash in the pan because the actual quality is not awesome, is it?
Well, I would. It's kind of hard to make a prediction in terms of what its longevity is going to be, other than to say it looks very promising right now. The one thing really nice about Twitter Spaces over what Spotify is doing and and even what Clubhouse once was, is that if you are a podcaster or you are a marketer or you're building a brand, that could cover, in my case, I do a lot with authors. It could be, people who are musicians, people who have a cause to champion. All of these people that normally engage with that kind of content are already here. They have been here for a long time. There's no question that the real-time trending aspect to Twitter Spaces is enormous. Okay, because it ties right in with the community that's already built. You don't have to have another app being made and then bring those people over. They're already here. So it's very, very promising. I would say that 2022, it's probably going to take probably another year for the jury to be really, to come in with a verdict in terms of this is something that's going to stay. But I would have to say at this point, it certainly seems like it's going to be very good. In terms of it being a production tool, I would stop short of that. I believe that it can be, and I plan on recording a podcast coming up here within the next week or two on Twitter Spaces. You mentioned the Rodecaster. There's a couple of other different devices that work the same. Tascam has one. Zoom has one. One of the things that I would encourage is using the multi-track features on those. For example, if you have a microphone set up, you could record that, let's say, on channel 1 on the Zoom on the PodTrack P4, I believe it is. You could record your voice on track 1, and you could record the audio from Twitter Spaces. I believe on that one it defaults to track 3. And the advantage to that is at least your local sound source is being recorded in full, clean audio. So when you go to put that in your DAW, which is digital audio workstation, and there's a number of them, you can process the sound for your voice one way to make that sound as good as possible. And then on the other track, you can take the audio from your Twitter Spaces and adjust that as necessary, because there's a lot of times those adjustments don't work on both of those sources. Right.
There's just not enough latitude, is there?
Yeah, so you can dial in. A lot of times audio from a platform like this sounds a little thin. So maybe what you can do is you can hit it with, a compressor or something like that. Maybe you hit it with some equalization, boost it up a little bit. Your voice, if it's recorded locally, may not need a whole lot. You might add a de-esser or something like that. And then when you mix that down, you'll be able to tweak each one of those sound sources independently. And a lot of the people that I've talked to that have something like the Rodecaster or the Zoom Track 4, the PodTrack 4, the Zoom PodTrack 4, the people who have that don't take advantage of that. They use it as an interface, which basically combines the sound source from their microphone and from Twitter Spaces, and then dumps it into something like Audacity or something like that. Using the multi-track feature is something that in post-production is something I would advise doing. So to do it, to answer your question, as it stands, I wouldn't describe Twitter Spaces as a production tool. However, I think it's a great option to use it to augment what you're doing with a host of other things. And in my case, I plan on doing one of these every once in a while to add it to my content mix on my podcast. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
it's brilliant. Yeah. Bobby, I really want to bring in Anne-Marie here because you both have Roadecasters. So what I use, and this is a really important point, what I was using up until 2 weeks ago is just the headphones that came in the packet, and you are exactly right, Billy. It sounded thin. Okay, but thin, not professional. So I bought a little gadget, which is a bit of a no-name brand. It cost me $275, includes a mic. It's a little bit noisy, but it does the job. But Rodecaster is a professional unit, professionally designed to maximize this. Anne-Marie, can you bring in some perspective on how you use the Rodecaster and how you manage your process? Because I'm sure people want to know how to improve the sound of their podcast and how to really maximize this out.
Yeah, well, because I record on StreamYard as well, they've now got the function, and that's what I've got it set up to record 2 separate tracks. So my team can edit, just as Billy said, the 2 separate tracks. With what I'm doing at the moment, because I have not yet listened, I have to go and listen, but I'm thinking that probably can really hear the difference between my voice as well as what we're picking up through Twitter Spaces. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And but certainly the stereo track, the multi-track is a good way to go, and it makes it so much easier to edit, rather than trying to edit it individually. So totally agree, Billy.
Editing is a real thing. It's really difficult, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now, I know Rose has got a hand up. This is really interesting to me, Rose. I'd love to hear your thoughts on where you're taking this, but we've had multiple discussions about local people, offering these services for a fee, and several rented premises, and you're a journalist, so I'd love to know what you think Twitter Spaces could become in this whole mix of podcasting and news and media. I'm sure you have a very unique perspective on it.
Thank you. Well, I missed the first part. I was out at grocery shopping, so I missed the first part of Anne-Marie's talk. But let me ask, maybe we can do this live in case anybody came in late, but Anne-Marie, are you talking about doing using StreamYard? So doing a video live stream and doing Spaces at the same time?
That's correct. We're doing that at the moment. Yes.
You're doing that already?
Yes.
Okay. That's awesome. I think it can be really valuable. I mean, so far, I guess when I've seen Twitter Spaces pop up over news events, they don't really link to, except maybe through a tweet, the news event. But you could, StreamYard could be showing videos and lots of, information as you might be learning about, it's always bad news, right? A tornado is something going on, or and so you could be, you're learning on on many levels. Let's say about a news event, whereas now it's you can usually you go to Twitter or you go to the news, broadcast news. I mean, you can hear it first in Twitter, right? But if we have this set up, the Twitter Spaces, you'll hear it first here, and then if you tie it into video, that's a whole new capability.
Yeah, well, I've just had a look at Anne-Marie. If you go to Anne-Marie Coach is the actual Twitter handle of Anne-Marie. She has this working.
So you can hear the audio while you're
talking into a microphone. Well, sorry?
You can hear the audio through Twitter. I know it worked through Facebook, so I'm assuming that it's working. I have to go.
I haven't had to listen to the audio, but I can see it.
Yeah.
Now, why this is important?
Because I haven't. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, look, I think it's important that we try to keep this idea evolving, because Twitter Spaces by itself is not enough. It goes away. When you push stop, it goes. And I use the analogy, and I keep coming back to this. You're going to go to the trouble of going overseas or getting on a cruise or saving up to go on a holiday. You're going to take a camera. You're going to want to take photos. So isn't it a shame that we've worked out ways to do it? But imagine if we had this conversation and everyone in this room shares all of their knowledge, and then it just goes away and no one gets to hear it again. That's a waste. So we are working diligently on finding ways to maximize these wonderful stories. On this call at the moment, we've got people calling in from all over the world that have never met each other, and in the course of events would never have met each other. Anne-Marie's in Melbourne, Rose is in New York. There's no way in the world you would ever meet in the real world. There's no way. I
mean, I can tell you three just over the weekend, 3 different spaces I was on that I met amazing people that I've now, because I was on the call, and then you can direct message somebody. There's Arlen Hamilton, who is has this VC startup, and she just opened it up to Q&A. And so, and I had realized that I had founded this hashtag called Women to Follow. I've written different profiles of women, and I realized I wrote one of hers that I never put out. So now I can go back to that, say what she said, had a screenshot from the Twitter Spaces, and update that. And now, she'll know who I am because I was in her Twitter Spaces for
It's
2 hours.
It's just amazing. So with that in mind, let's keep the room running. If you want to speak, just put your hand up, and I'll mention you, call you out specifically. I'm going to bring in Doyle, my mate Doyle from Perth, a long way away in so many different ways in the world of eternal lockdown, and also originally from Canada, now living in Western Australia. So, Doyle, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what you think Twitter Spaces is now and what it could become.
Yeah, well, Perth and Melbourne isn't as far as Melbourne and New York, so there's always that. But we feel kind of trapped over here in Western Australia at times. So ask me about that later. Anyway, yeah, no, happy to be here, Keith. Really, really appreciate it. And as you know, we've kind of been on this journey for a couple of years, kind of seeing what new technologies are coming and what platforms are useful and which ones aren't. And we kind of had that discussion about Clubhouse and that it may not be quite what it all is made up to be. And then Twitter Spaces came along. And I mean, quite honestly, you kind of flipped dramatically in terms of what it can do, or I guess the understanding that maybe it is a cool little tool, which, is totally fun. Don't get me wrong. But I'm kind of looking at it from the strategic side of things, is how can we actually use it properly to be part of our content plan and part of our digital strategy as well. And to me, that's really quite what it needs to become. It's great to have a discussion, right? Don't get me wrong, like just to talk for talking's sake and connecting with people around the world or around the block or that sort of thing. But if we want to kind of use it strategically, we have to make sure that there are all those hooks. There's that railroad track that kind of brings people to our business at some point in time, right? So I'm kind of just looking and seeing right now. I'm sort of in that experimenting stage as well to see, well, should I do it? And how should I do it? And how do I connect everything together into my roadmap so that I have something that, adds value, but also, encourages the business side of it as well, which is obviously.
Can you see a funnel? Can you see a possible funnel here, do you think?
Yeah, well, definitely. Honestly, this is my first Spaces. I did a Clubhouse a couple days ago. I haven't done a lot of those, but what I'm really looking for is how do you kind of design the content? Because what I really like what you're doing is you create sort of those topics that are really quite engaging. And how does a business do that? And do they need to create that sort of similar message over across everything that they do as well? So it's really fascinating, and just kind of playing around with it, obviously, to see if it works and how you can use things a little bit differently. So I've been talking a lot lately about Twitter Spaces, and I think I want to thank you, Keith, because you kind of kept it top of my mind. And I'll probably be launching something very soon. But again, I want to make sure that I've got those pieces in place as well. And that it's not just a fad, because that's kind of one of the things in social and digital is that you see these platforms and they come and they go so quickly. So, you know what, if you want to test them out and try them out, cool, nothing wrong with that. But if you want to kind of use them more strategically, then that takes a little bit more time. And that's kind of where I'm at in my Spaces journey.
Well, let me pick up on what you've said there, and let me introduce you to my mate Doyle, who is in Perth, and we do sort of feel for him over there because they've got a very oppressive government, and the lockdown doesn't end till February. We've even got a date for it. So they're going to have Christmas in lockdown. But Doyle and I did a show when lockdown started, April 2020, called Live Streaming Decoded, where we pulled apart all of the different live streaming video platforms, BeLive and StreamYard and Restream, and there was hundreds of them, but we picked about 10. And I then went on to do a live streaming show on StreamYard every week as a result of that show. But I've never had, and this is a really interesting point, Doyle, I've never had as much engagement on the show as I've had in this format. We've got 23 people on the call that are talking to each other in real time. We can follow them on Twitter. I'm having DM back channels with several people about this. After the show goes, we get a replay, recording, and we have these ongoing chats. I spend hours a day catching up on all these conversations which we start on a Twitter space. So I think there is an enormous potential here. And I'm going to bring in Ruth, a fellow Canadian, actually from Edmonton. I think, is that right? Ruth, are you from Edmonton?
Edmonton.
Well,
was
I'm
born in
actually a little bit
Edmonton.
northeast of Edmonton, but
In a town called, what's it called again?
What?
Bonnyville.
Bonneville.
Oh, okay. Hey, I grew up in Lac La Biche. What a
Okay,
small
yeah.
world.
Small
I
world.
lived in Lac La Biche for a
Which
while,
is-
so I know.
Yeah. It's maybe like 100 kilometers from Bonneville, I think, if I remember
Yeah,
correctly.
cool.
And Fort McMurray as well. I lived up further up north. So cool.
Next week we've got a show called Discover How to Use Social Audio to Build a Global Community. And here we have two Canucks that lived 100 miles from each other, now on a call on Twitter Spaces, chatting in real time. Well, where
Around
else
the
can you
world.
do that? I'm around the world. So, Ruth, what do you think of Twitter Spaces? What do you think the potential is, and where do you think we might take this?
Well, I'm really excited about Twitter Spaces because I do see huge potential for building community. And that's what I help my clients focus on, is getting clients and building community. So I'm doing some experimenting myself. I love Canva. So thank you, Kiki, for sharing your tips on creating the video, because that's definitely something I'm going to try. And I really have seen how building connections with new people, and not just new people, but people from all across the globe. I haven't seen that on any other platform like I've
Very
seen
unique, isn't it?
Spaces. Yes, definitely.
Have you been doing some yourself?
I have done, yes, I was running Spaces every Tuesday earlier in the day. I'm thinking that evening probably, it seems like evening works better for more people. So I'm going to have to switch the time that I do my Spaces, but definitely want to do something regularly and keep experimenting.
Oh, that's brilliant. And Louisa is calling in from Mexico. This just proves how global we are. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what we've chatted about so far, Louisa, and how you think it plays out in the Twitter Spaces world. Is it a good platform for creating podcasts, and where do you think it might go? Oh, we've got you there, Louisa. Can you speak? Can you get to the?
I think Twitter Spaces is
There you are.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
You can.
you hear me? It's because I'm on a road trip.
Oh, you're on a road trip.
Yeah, you're with me. Thank you for coming
no
with
worries. Anne-Marie's got the Roadcaster and you're on a road
Yeah.
trip.
I didn't get that.
That's all right. No worries. It's Aussie humour. If I have to explain it, it's not that funny. But what do you think of what do you
Okay,
think
I'm
of
sorry.
Twitter Spaces, and where do you think it might go as relates to what we've been talking about today?
Well, I think it's a very valuable tool to connect with people of every place in the world. Well, that is obviously connected in Twitter. It's a very, very fine tool that has been refining with our own experiences. And I think, well, the sky is the limit. I mean, you can just use it to chat with people. Right now, I am like using it to feel that you find people are with me on my road trip, which is very nice. And of course, like a tool for podcast series is wonderful. I like to attend to your podcast. Well, I mean, to your spaces and also to other people's spaces, like Nat here, who makes them regularly, and I get a lot of new ideas. I get to talk with talented, kind people, and to get inspired by different. So I think it's a very valuable tool, and I thank you for making all the spaces you have, because I have really learned a lot and connect with a lot of amazing people.
Yeah, we're losing the signal there. You must be going through a tunnel or a series of mountains. But Billy, I'll bring you in a minute, but Nat's got his hand up. Nat, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, and then I'll go back to Billy, who's got his hand up as well.
Thank you so much, Keith. Always nice to be in your spaces here. I had two thoughts. One is that, as Louisa mentioned, I host a space regularly, like every Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern. And the only reason I mention that is in reference to Ruth about morning versus what works for me. Evenings, I like to do other things usually. And because it's been a regular thing, it has increased in attendance over time because people get to know me and my co-host Samantha. And we, every week there's a consistent number of people. I think based on like Space's dashboard, we probably get about 50 people that come and go, and some stay on a regular basis every week now. And one of the other things that we've implemented that helps with attendance is we use Luma. And so we set up, since it's a regular time every week, we just have people subscribe to a Luma event, since it's a recurring event. And then each week updates people with an email with the link. And so it's a great way for people to come on a regular basis as well.
Brilliant. So you've got a bit of a system going there too.
Yeah, because people kept on asking us, hey, can you remind us when you have your spaces? And after so many people, you can't remember. It's tough to just DM everyone that asks you to remind you. So to have a system just ease it off of us of like, oh, if you want to attend, then subscribe to here. If you can't, that's fine too. But when you start to have to DM everyone, it starts to get overwhelming.
Yeah, Twitter hasn't really worked this out yet. They're getting better, but as I said, it's only been going a year, and we're still working out whether it has merit. I'm playing around with it. One of the things that is very important for disclosure here is that, like my mate Doyle, in Melbourne, Australia, we were in lockdown for 266 consecutive days. And there was a massive fine if you left your house for more than 5 Ks, and you couldn't go shopping and you couldn't go out. And it was just oppressive. So live streaming became my lifeline. And then when Twitter Spaces came, it really lit things up. Here I am in my house with a bit of tech, and I'm chatting to people all over the world. Arguably even more fun than going into the city and meeting people I even know now. So there's no way in the world I would meet these people in my real life because I've never been to London or New York, and there's no way I'm going there in the next few years. We're not allowed. So Twitter Spaces operates really, really fills a really important void for a lot of people. Whether or not that translates into a business action, we're still deciding, but I think it can if we leverage it more. Billy, you've got your hand up from a previous question, but jump in there and tell us what you're thinking.
Absolutely, Keith. Thank you. Getting back to how to utilize spaces, one of the things you may want to just step back from and ask yourself is, what am I using Twitter for now? Okay, I have found that Twitter works very well for what I would call macro issues. And here again, I do a lot with authors and people who want to promote their music. This is something that's universal. You can utilize, you can buy their content, engage with their content anywhere in the world. So if you're doing that with Twitter now, then that's kind of what you want to do with Twitter Spaces. You want to create that content that is relevant and boost that content in the same way your normal tweets do. And especially with the trending aspect of Twitter, you want to be very much in tune to what's trending, what are people interested in. There was quite an infamous quote by a presidential advisor a number of years ago who said, he told the president, never let a crisis go to waste. And a lot of people took it negatively, but I understand his point. When you have an electorate who's interested in something, that's the time to start talking about it. Okay. So you want to be very much in tune with current events. If, in my case, if I have an author who is writing about, let's say, mental health recovery, and it's Mental Health Recovery Month, and there's a lot of people, that's the perfect time to do a space. And you just need to connect the dots in terms of how this content is going to flow and just be aware of it. So that's kind of my 2 cents there.
Yeah, and you call that newsjacking, don't you?
Yeah, that's a term that's another one that probably should be branded into something else because it sounds kind of negative. But yes, that's exactly what it is.
Look, I'll give you a really good example of how this could work. Yesterday, a friend of mine who was in the call a little bit before, Cara, who's actually probably doing a Twitter space as we speak, she's interviewing a series of New Zealanders about their winery. Now, just yesterday, the Prime Minister of New Zealand announced that New Zealand is going to move towards a smoke-free environment. They're going to make radical reforms to make smoking illegal. Big news. Now, she's talking to someone from New Zealand about wine. She decided that that's probably too close to home, but it's a good example of what we're talking about, isn't it, Billy? That was in the news yesterday and would be a top of mind for New Zealanders, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a perfect example of a good time to engage with that content when you got people out there searching for it anyway. I mean, that's help them find some, help them find the content they're looking for. Absolutely.
Yeah. You can't get your head around not smoking, just grab a bottle of red. Just Shiraz. Just Shiraz it. I might even create a hashtag Shiraz it. But look, I've got a couple more people in the call. Vandana has asked to speak in pursuit of climate change, piano branding and circular economy. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. The circular economy is something that's very close to my heart, but we haven't spoken before, so it's a little bit of a risk, but jump in and tell us what you're thinking and where are you going with this one?
Yeah, so Keith, thank you for including me and giving me this opportunity. I am pretty, inclined to talk about climate change and circular economy, but because of listening to other speakers, I have just had a disruptive idea coming to me as I speak. So you're talking about creating podcasts and creating usefulness out of Twitter. I was just thinking, how can we give a spin to things which we don't want to talk about? For example, just hear me out, and I could be wrong and I could be right. I don't know. So there is so much of things that we don't want to talk about, which is politics and religion, primarily because to each its own. But at the same time, I am coming to believe that because we leave these topics unaddressed, many a times it creates disengagement. And so can there be a way without people taking parties and names and just discuss the issue completely unbiased?
Yeah.
And that could be just the way that we actually, mobilize people to think about topics, think about problems with the solution and not mask it with the hat that you wear. Whether I'm a green or I'm liberal or conservative, it doesn't matter. What matters is there is a problem. And how can we crowdsource ideas to solve that problem? Can we do that?
I love what you said there. I'm going to bring Rose in on this because Rose is a journalist. We've had this discussion. Like, I'm not the right person to talk to about this because, as I said, we were in lockdown for 266 days, and I can tell you for sure, because we're mates now, that my depression was off the scale. Like, you can just imagine, locked in your house 200 days in a row. I didn't want to get out of bed. There was no reason to get out of bed because I couldn't go anywhere. So I can't deal with the big stories. But Rose and I had a discussion about this, that some of these bigger discussions need to be chatted about. And Rose, do you think Twitter Spaces is a place to do that?
I think it depends, how it's moderated. I was in one space once, and I think it was a reaction to the trial, the Rittenhouse trial, and it was somebody who he wasn't a journalist, and so when I came on, he was asking me how would I. So I looked at it the way I would look at it if I were a reporter, and the questions that I would ask about the defendant. But I don't think it was necessary. And then the conversation sometimes got nasty. I mean, I think that for that to happen, like I've heard good conversations when it's moderated by NPR or Tara Swisher or, I think that helps. Or if it were me and, another journalist. And I myself wasn't that comfortable talking about the case because it wasn't my, beat. It wasn't something I was really involved in. So I think it can work. And then other times it doesn't, because then you're just, you're just talking in the air. But I mean, maybe people like that. I mean, I've heard it on Clubhouse. There's lots of, on Clubhouse, like there's the 3-minute news in the morning, 3-minute news in the evening, and people share something in the news that interests them, and then people talk about it. But like, if I want to, to me, like, I'd rather just, read the headlines. To me.
Thanks, Rose, for what you're saying, and so the question that I asked for all of you was only because because there's so much of wrong news that we all discuss, and that becomes like we want to avoid it, but then it keeps getting more and more. And I don't know whether the disruption is the right way, but somebody has to take it up and talk about issues and talk about in a manner that calms the situation rather than kind of.
So are you talking about, by disruption, do you mean misinformation?
Yes, pretty much.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
I'm using the disruption word because as a marketer, I kind of keep challenging myself to come up with ways to look at the problem. And
yeah,
it may be a cliche, but then that's the best way to emphasize how we can think outside the box.
Well, I guess the term that's mostly used now in the way what's happening with platforms is is misinformation. That we're being bombarded with misinformation, and that is, you're seeing that. And I interviewed the person, Maria Ressa, who just won the Nobel Peace Prize as part of a show I was doing before she won the Nobel Peace Prize, that she's already doing amazing things. And she says that there's just, with the way it used to be, there was another world before all these social media platforms, and people got the news, they respected the news, there was a structure, and now that is all out the window, really, because anyone can go on any platform, right? So if you think about that, somebody could come on this platform and say XYZ is the real story, or it's X kind of people that are against, that are nasty. I mean, I've seen very nasty things, and that's bad. There can be.
Anne-Marie, you've got some thoughts there. Let's keep the conversation moving on. I really honour what's happening here. There's a couple of things going on here. One is it's a little bit of a tangent, and I honour the fact that Twitter Spaces could be an extremely useful tool to have these discussions, but it's a little off topic. So Anne-Marie's got a hand up. I just want to honour the fact that Anne-Marie is talking mainly about creating a podcast and using this as a sharing, learning platform. I personally am not interested in solving the world's problems on this platform, but I honour the fact that it possibly could be used for that. I'm just not emotionally strong enough to do it. And so it's just not my skill set. And I wouldn't be involved in that, but I can see that it definitely could be used for that. What do you think, Anne-Marie? You've had your hand up there.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, one of the reasons why we started Career Success Radio was because we knew that things were tough. We were both working in the job industry, and we'd heard of many, many people losing their jobs. But one of the things that prompted us was we were tired of the doom and gloom being portrayed by mainstream media. And we knew that it was impacting the psyche of our ideal clients, which is one of the reasons that drove us to share a message of hope, one of possibility. We knew things had to change as far as job search. It could take a lot longer. So we started that podcast as a way to share hope and possibility in the lives of job seekers in a time where things were tough. So to answer the question, I love all the conversation going on. If there is a space or an area that you want to create a community around, we're probably going to have more smaller communities. But one of the things that was said, and I think this is so important, that we can have respectful conversations with people, even if we don't agree. And that's where, if you're going to hold a Twitter space, you have to know, you have to set the ground rules. What is, acceptable? What is not acceptable? And if people do contribute to the conversation in a way that is arrogant, nasty, terrible, whatever it is, then you need to step in and then, manage that. But set the intention, and so that you know exactly what the purpose is of that, and then set the ground rules and make sure that whoever contributes is being respectful of others as well.
Yeah, I think what you said there is unbelievable, Anne-Marie, because Career Success Radio is going to be certainly one of my top 10 achievements in my lifetime. 2 years, once a week, positive information about finding a job. It was a very specific platform. You knew exactly what you were going to get. We were going to talk about helping you get a job in a world where the negative environment was getting us all down. And sometimes you need to come back to a specific purpose. With that in mind, Kiki's got some ideas about several things. One is there's a slight imbalance in the male-female ratio in this call, and we're trying to work out behind the scenes how to improve that. So we're going to do another waterfall. But let's bring it back to the topic at hand. The topic at hand is how to use Twitter Spaces, or if we should use Twitter Spaces to create a podcast to share your message, and also a bit of a throw to the idea that next week we're talking about building a global community, very much what we've just said, a global community of like-minded, respectful people that can even agree to disagree, but work towards a common goal. So, Kiki, tell us what you're thinking there with the stats about the ratio and how do we improve it, and let's do another waterfall.
Okay, so I love that. I was looking at the stats because I remember one time we were in the space and Rose had a talk about that, and I believe Bobby as well had some comments, and we have been discussing about getting women more involved in spaces, as we need to get women involved in every area of life because they are forgotten. In some cases, very, very unfortunately, even marginalized. So we want to share that in this space, I have been looking for a while, and 50% of the people in the space are women. Whether they identify as women or not, they are women based on their profile picture. I was just using that as a compass. I hope it's okay with everyone. I just wanted to do a brief extra statistic on that, and maybe we can bring that up to Andrew so he can layer that in dashboard, because I think it's very interesting, and including women too. Maybe we can, as we present the questions, we can say, women, how would a woman fit in Twitter Spaces? Or, so we can get, right? So we can get more engagement, so we can engage more women to come in and check this out, talk about spaces, see what's going on, because not many people, still we have many people that are not familiar with Twitter Spaces and the power that they have created globally. So I think it's worthwhile trying, and maybe we can still use these questions, but maybe we can reward them, or in one of them we can just add a factor there that it would attract women, and we can see how that's going to get more people.
Yeah, well, let's do that with next week's questions. Why don't we do that with next week's questions?
Yes,
and actually,
exactly. Right.
You want to do a waterfall and see if we can actually bring in more women?
Sure. So more women or men, we don't know what we're going to get. However, if we can have everyone participate, women or men, it was just an interesting statistic because this has been a little bit of a talk in Twitter Spaces. So with that being said, at the bottom of your phone, there is a blue circle with a white feather and a plus button. I would like you to touch that, and it's going to pop up the space, and then you can type in Twitter Spaces, You can add his name. You can hashtag virtually unlimited audio. And you can add some people from the space. And on the count of 3, we can just tweet this out in the universe, in the metaverse, and try to get some more people in. So on the count of 3, 1, 2, 3, please tweet this out.
See the here, funky sound? Funky sound?
Thank
I'm going to
you.
go one step further. I want you to imagine this going through the whole universe. Okay, so we've transported up to Planet X, and let's see if we can get more women. I actually want to throw to Rose, but then I want to throw to Dee. Rose and I have had this exact discussion. Are you thinking, Rose, also that women are underrepresented here on Twitter Spaces, or just maybe not interested?
No, I was just noticing before Kiki spoke. I said, "Wow, today there's a lot of women in the space." So that's great. And I have talked about this, and part of what I'm trying to do, and the reason I launched this whole idea of the hashtag is to amplify women's voices on social media, because most people, 95% of the reporters in Washington, for example, men follow other men, and they only follow 6% of women in DC. So, the same thing is happening on Twitter Spaces. And you could say, well, women aren't talking, because that's what somebody said in the space. Well, if women want to talk, just it's open, just talk. But I think that there's, depending on the woman, but, I think women are, if there's a space with 90% women, a woman doesn't necessarily want to, come in and say, well, gee, there's 90% men in this room. Are you?
Can I ask a question? Do you think it's because I'm the host? Can I ask, Rose, would you be less inclined to go to a Twitter space if there was a guy hosting, or would you be more inclined to go to a Twitter space?
It would be if there were 3, if there was a man hosting and 2 co-hosts and they're also men. If I see a space where the host is either male or female, but the speakers are mixed, then I'll be more likely to go to it. But
it's a very important question, because we've got to. This is exactly what Twitter Spaces could become. It's a very, very, very powerful mechanism.
But it's going to reflect everything else in social media. And I don't know if enough people, especially the Twitter community, people who are, doing this, are aware of that, because there are times that you do a Twitter Spaces to talk about Twitter Spaces when most of the engineers could be men, and there's sometimes like 4 men and 1 woman from Twitter. And I think you have to take conscious, you have to be proactive about it. You can't just say, well, there wasn't a woman available. You don't do the space until you find a good, you find a good mix, not only by gender, but by race and ethnicity.
Yeah. Look, we do know for sure that Twitter, and I know this for sure because I've heard robust discussions about this, Twitter is aware that there's a disparity between some hate speech, some negative connotations, and they are working very, very, very hard to dispel those and keep the mix even. I know they're working on it, and I guess you've got to leave it up to people. But I actually said to a very good mate of mine in London yesterday that in regards to LinkedIn, that LinkedIn is not enticing me to make content there. I personally don't make content on LinkedIn because it's just not a very cool place to make content. It's not easy to do it, and I don't like doing it. So if Twitter Spaces is not easy to do and people don't want to do it, then it doesn't matter whether you're male or female or from any country in the world, you're just not going to do it. So it is up to Twitter to make that a thing, and I really want to encourage, I'll try and get them to do more of that. But talking about that, I want to bring in Dee to talk about this. I'll give a couple of minutes to get the mic. What are you thinking about this discussion about Twitter Spaces as a podcasting mechanism as a global discussion platform and of getting everyone to talk about things in general. We got you there, Dee?
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can. Yep.
Okay. Well, I think it's the perfect mechanism to do this. And in fact, from my perspective, I kind of see that that's actually what's taking place. People are using their spaces for various, different things. I have yet to host one. I do have plans, but I'm in a lot of podcast spaces and, the podcast community. I think this is a perfect vehicle, to promote your podcast, to grow your podcast and your audience. And, I just wanted to speak a little bit to the makeup of Twitter Spaces versus male to female ratio. I think it varies at times, but I see, of course, it's based on the people that I follow a lot of times, but I am starting to see a lot more spaces that specifically are like women oriented. And the great thing about it is that some of them actually do have males in them. And they're encouraged and it's very inclusive. And I found that a lot of the Twitter spaces that I go into tend to be very inclusive, very geared toward kind of a global community of helping, learning, and sharing. So I think, of course, I've seen some spaces with some issues and things, but I think that they're aware of it. And, I feel like a lot of it is up to the users to kind of keep it good and honest. So, that's kind of my take on it.
I do know they're working on it, and I do know that if you really were a mongrel and you wanted to have a Twitter space, you could, and you could just say whatever you wanted, and you'd probably get away with it. And I don't think they've got a mechanism yet to control that. They are working on it, but I just don't hang out with mongrels. I don't know any. I just don't want to be around them. So my spaces are always going to be really cool people, hopefully a 50-50 mix from all over the world, talking about really cool things and helping each other. That's going to be what my Twitter spaces are always going to be about. And as a moderator, and this is actually a really important point, one of the reasons why I love what Kiki did is that if we ever get off topic, we didn't that much today, but we have in the past, I can always say, look, guys, all you have to do is refer back to that original tweet. You can see the 4 questions that we're talking about. Let's bring it back to this is the job of the host. It's quite hard to do sometimes. Bring it back and say, this is the job of the host. We're talking about these 4 questions. Let's keep to topic. Let's be civil. And you've got quite a lot of power as the host to mute people and kick them out, and the co-hosts provide valuable functions there. But what do you think, Indra? I want to bring Indra in because she's the co-host. She's occupying probably the most important seat in the house. Her and Kiki are co-hosts today. So on Twitter Spaces, you can have 2 co-hosts and 12 speakers. Now, the co-host is a very important job, and I'd love to know what you think of that job or that role, Indra. What do you think that means to be a co-host? Because it's quite difficult to do, isn't it?
Well, I think the thing is to mainly be supportive to everything. There were a couple of times where, particularly we want to be very supportive to our special guests, and today it's Anne-Marie. So as a co-host, there's some people that haven't been on the space before, or I've looked at I've checked out what their profile is, and I've sort of thought, I know, and then they've actually behaved exactly the same way. They've tried to be speaking, and so I do step in and mute people if they just start to overspeak, and I drop them a DM and just say, look, apologies for muting you, because, we want to keep this all positive and friendly. but we always want to honor our main guest, and then of course when there's speakers that come up and they share information. So it's kind of, I think it's a balancing act, and then trying to chime in without taking away from what the topic is. And sometimes if the host is busy doing something technical, like if you're busy doing something technically behind the scenes with Kiki, as I know you were doing your figures before, then it would be an opportunity to make sure everything stays on track for either myself or...
You're providing a vital role. So first things first, big 100 for Indra. And you look, my new gadget. I got it working. And Kiki, what do you think the role of the co-host is for people that haven't yet really fully explored Twitter Spaces? What do you think that role is for the co-host to really support the host? How do you play that role out?
Well, the co-host is more like a moderator, and depending on the space, the co-host can actually take a look at the speakers so everybody gets a chance, and then the co-host can ask the speakers after they had a say if they would like to step down, so somebody else can step up. So again, though, it depends, because the first time we did that, we had people leave the room. But I think now people are more used to it because there are more spaces, and this is something that people know and are aware and familiar, because they realize that there are only just as many speakers that they can be asked. So I think it just depends on the space and how long you have been. And this way you can reset the room, and then you can do a waterfall. So you just do all these tricks to keep the room engaging, especially if you hold long rooms, like Keith loves to hold long rooms, because the conversation is so interesting, and the people just come and go like a wave, and it's just so super interesting to watch.
I really appreciate, really appreciate what you're doing for me. I'm going to use that every day. I just love it. I get up sometimes, I just play with the gadget. I've got nothing to say. I just walk around the house with this gadget in my hand, pretending I'm on the radio. So funny. Look, I want to bring in Golden Retriever. We've chatted a few times about how she uses Twitter Spaces, and we'll probably do some of our own in the new year, like 10 days to Christmas today. So we're winding down. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on how Twitter Spaces is evolving and where we can take it. We got you there, Golden Retriever channel.
I'm here. Yeah. Good evening, and thanks for giving me a moment. Sorry, I've been having technical trouble here, folks. But it has been very interesting listening to this discussion. No question about that. And I think that there are so many topics that have been brought up this evening that are really critical to whether we're going to see this go forward as a successful effort. I think it will be, but I think that they need to be addressed. One thing I've been talking with Keith about is sound quality. And I noticed that he put up a poll, and I think close to 70% of the people who responded said they were just using their Androids or iPhones to host a space. And I'd say this is that the competition is busting their backsides to improve sound quality. And right now, what we have is sound, which is good. I'm glad we're there. But I think that that's something that needs to be addressed. But I also think that I'm curious to know, what percentage of you, I mean, this is not a question to answer now, but of those of you who answered, I'm just using my phone, there are, I'm a musician, and I have got just incredibly expensive microphones and a digital audio workstation that I've texted with Keith about at home, and I understand a good deal of what Billy has been talking about with you guys over the last several chats. But it dawned on me, there has to be a simple fix that would improve people's sound quality. And that's step one. You have to be heard, and you have to have your voice sound good. And I spoke this evening with two sound engineers, and there is a new microphone out that may be a direct to your phone, USB plug and play mic. Takes no software, no problems. It's a Shure mic that may be something that would help a lot of people out who have no experience in dealing with sound processing, because it's a complicated deal. It's no question about it.
Let me pick up on that. I really want to riff on this a bit more, and I'll run the room on this. The actual Twitter poll you were referring to was slightly different than the one I've posted because it's finished. But I asked the question, what microphone do you use for Twitter Spaces? And it was a very specific question. And 70% of people answered this exact same scenario with, I just use my phone because I'm just turning up on the go, right? So I actually went one step further, and this Twitter poll is still going, so I'd love you to vote on this. If you were going to run a podcast, what microphone would you use if you were going to turn it into a podcast? But still, 39% of even knowing that it was going to be a podcast still say they would just use their phone. And this is exactly what you're talking about, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And I think that sound quality, look at it this way. Like I said, the competition is working hard to improve sound quality so that they're, in one case, they're working on a thing that will make the conversation sound spatially, sort of like a regular room. Yeah. And it'll sound more like a normal conversation. And that's something that is not insignificant. And there are a lot of audio players out there sort of on the subcontracting side of this equation. I have found out that are working on stuff like this. Now, whether Twitter will decide that they need to take that step, I don't know. I think that's something that, as content creators, we ought to work hard to convince them, yes, you ought, you should.
So as an audiophile, what does that mean? Tell me, as an audiophile, what do you think Twitter's not doing and where could they improve?
Right now, Twitter's just processing signal. They're just completely, all they're doing is processing signal. And what they do is they take the signal you send them and it gets completely crunched up. They downsize the files, and how they're doing it, I'm not sure, but I'm positive they're doing it. As somebody that understands this stuff. And
thin and tinny and raw, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's very, the sound quality and the way that voices come out, it's very tinny. It sounds, you sound very high pitched. You're missing some of the low end of your voice
nice bass.
Mid range. And
you're missing the bass.
Yeah,
you're missing the bass.
Exactly. Even women are. It is. You just end up with the low end of your voice gone and the mid range not sounding great. And, like I said, I totally understand the software that Billy was talking about. It's a plugin called iZotope Nectar.
That's expensive, isn't it?
Oh, it's costly. It's costly, and it goes into even more costly digital audio workstations. I work with Pro Tools, which will cost you an arm and a leg if you want to really get into the high end of it. But, you want to put together a full tilt digital audio workstation that will cost you a great deal of money. And
Well,
you
let's pick up on this. There's a couple of new people that have joined the room on your inspiration. So really, thank you so much, Beth. You've jumped, you've taken things up a notch. I know that Pedro and Tim want to speak, and I'm going to bring you in a minute.
Please.
But I want to throw to Anne-Marie, who is a podcasting expert, and because you often say, Anne-Marie, message before microphone. Let's pick up on this idea of audio quality on Twitter Spaces. How much money do we need to spend? How much time do we need to spend to get that right? Or are we jumping the gun?
Well, all of my clients are coaches, so it's a different space, because if they were musicians or their audio quality was almost, if I use the word demanded of them, then I certainly would recommend that they spend time on audio. So for a lot of my coaches or clients, it's the message that they're really sharing to their ideal client. And when I talked about the message before the microphone, what I mean by that is that if you're not clear on your message, if you're not clear on all of the things that make you unique, how you're going to position yourself in the marketplace, then even with the most expensive microphone, you're still not going to get the results you want, particularly if you don't have the right strategy and that kind of thing. So that's why I always say message before microphone. Now, if your audio quality is so bad that it distracts, it becomes a distraction, then I would certainly recommend that you do something. But I've heard feedback from even my clients and my colleagues who have said that if there is a specific topic that they're very interested in hearing more about, they will forgive a level of lack of quality, if you will. So, if you make sure that your content is so good on Twitter Spaces, I think people will be more forgiving that it's not that high quality. But I agree with what people have said. Let's hope that Twitter continues to improve the sound quality so that we don't have to go out and spend hundreds and thousands of dollars on processors and all of the gadgets to help us.
Well, what I'm using now has cost me $275 and includes a mic. And I think that's a good balance for a beginner. What Anne-Marie has got is a Rodecaster, which is slightly better, but it is a better product. Before I go to Pedro and Tim, Anne-Marie, can I just ask if you got a 2 o'clock, you need to go?
I'll probably go about 10 minutes past 2 if it's still going. But the conversation's been so valuable. I'm hanging on because I just love listening to the feedback that people are giving. So
yeah. So why don't we go with Pedro, who I haven't met before and has come into my space. And I'd love to hear your thoughts, Pedro, on what you think we've been chatting about and what's your take on that.
No, I definitely second what Anne-Marie ended up saying is people come for the content and stay for the host, but they will leave if your audio is crap. Currently, and to the poll, I use a pod mic. When I am in my mobile studio, I do a lot of traveling, so I'm in hotel rooms. So I definitely have to kind of soundproof my space with a lot of pillows and whatnot. But I do travel with my Rodecaster Pro and a pod mic. So that's what I'm talking to everybody that's on the stage with currently.
What are some really important hacks for people that in Twitter Spaces in an environment where the audio is not that great? You could spend a lot of money and still not get the right sound. What's a good hack for people that are just starting here? They might not be able to afford a Rodecaster or a Rode or even a Shure mic. What do you recommend? Have you got some powerful hacks to get people started?
Yes, most definitely. One of the biggest things is if you are going to use your Twitter Spaces as a podcast, invest in some wired headphones versus your AirPods or Bluetooth due to the latency that sometimes you'll get from that. And then try to get in a nice environment if you can, because you have the ambient noise. You're at a coffee shop and you're having a conversation there. It is what it is. Sometimes you can't be in that perfect studio environment. Sometimes you can't be in a hotel room with lots of pillows. You're out in the field. You're field recording. That's perfectly fine. But also think about, are you going to take the audio and do something with it post-production to make it a little bit better, draw out some of that noise, increase your volume, those things. So a pair of maybe $10, $15 headphones will go a long way with our $1,000 phones that we carry with us.
Because you can hear what you're getting. Yeah?
Yes, definitely. And you don't drop any audio.
Yeah. One of the thing that's very bad about just having a headset plugged in is that you can't hear yourself. And I can tell you for sure that when you can hear yourself, it changes the way you speak, doesn't it?
Oh my goodness, yes it does.
Yeah. So this is a really important hack. I wasn't expecting this, but in the Nest, I just to refer back to what Beth was saying, 67% of people who did the original poll said that they just use their phone on Twitter Spaces. And picking up on the original question of what do you do to market yourself, if you just spend a little bit of money on tech, you've already put yourself ahead of 67% of the crowd, because 67% of the crowd are just using a pair of tinny headphones. And if you can just spend a little bit of time, even getting a pillow or doing some soundproofing, you're going to make a big difference. So this is really, really powerful. I'm really glad we're having this discussion because it's taking it up a notch. What about you, Tim? What do you recommend, and how do we get that great sound but not spend thousands of dollars?
Hello, Keith. How are you doing? And everyone else. So this is my first time coming to you guys' space, and I just wanted to say thank you for this time as well. My question is, I use my phone as well to do Twitter Spaces. So are y'all buying these microphones on Amazon? Are y'all going to a special tech store, Walmart, Target? Like, where can I find the ones that can connect to the iPhone?
Yeah, I'll take this, but I'll also run the room. So what you're doing, the sound that you just got there is on your iPhone, yeah?
Yes, it's a brand new iPhone, probably like a
iPhone
week
13, yeah, or 14?
It's SE actually. It's an upgrade. I had the 8 Plus prior to this, and it's a tremendous difference. So I can only imagine what like a 13 would sound like, but I can imagine even more with a microphone attached to it.
Yeah, so I'll take this and then I'll run the room. I have an Android phone, a Samsung 21, and I run a PC, but I'll also try and get someone who's got a Mac. So I have this little mixer I got on Amazon for $275, including an XLR mic. I think this is tremendous value. It took me a while to set it up, but I've set it up and it's got 4 settings, presets. This is the Pro setting, lots of reverb. You can see it's like a big room, like I'm singing at the Super Bowl. I'm singing at the Super Bowl. A big echo. This is the pop filter setting, so it's still lots of reverb. This is the MC feature. This will be me speaking at the conference for the Medical Association in New York. And then this is just the original setting, which sounds much, much better. So this is $275 Australian dollars, probably cheaper in the US. Comes with a mic, has lots of gadgets. So this is my place in the world. I'm gonna play around with all these gadgets and share what I know. And that's a little bit of money to spend, but it's not much money to spend if you're going to turn this into a business. So that's cool, and it works with my Samsung 21, and it plays through my PC. But I might run the room and see if anyone's got some Mac solutions. You have Mac, Anne-Marie. Why don't you pick up on this? Do you use your Mac to do this, or do you have your PC? Does the Rodecaster work with both?
So yes, I have.
Yeah, that's quick question. Yep.
Yeah, Tim.
So from my knowledge, you can't do space. You can listen to Spaces on the Mac computer, but you can't host Spaces on the Mac computer.
You can't host Twitter Spaces on any desktop device, any laptop, any PC yet. But it's coming. This is exactly why I bought this piece of tech, because it's like an interface. I'm jumping in ahead of the game, and in a way, what I'm doing there is I'm telling the world that I'm serious about Twitter Spaces. I think it's a thing. I'm gonna leverage it. I'm gonna learn it. I'm gonna teach it. I'm gonna share it, because I don't think it's a fad. I might be wrong, but anyway, I bought myself this for Christmas, and I'm having fun even if it is. But is that something that you could possibly afford, or is even that a bit of a stretch?
No, it's perfect. I was just curious because I know it will work so much better if it was hooked up to my laptop. And I didn't know if you knew something or had a different insight on if Twitter was going to.
It's not coming. It maybe 2022, maybe January.
Yeah.
What we did find out today as a piece of really good news, you might find this really encouraging. You can now listen to replays on your desktop. This actually only happened in the last week. So it does show us that Twitter is serious about adding desktop functionality. The replay of this show will be available on your desktop as soon as I push stop until I delete it. If I do it, delete it, because I'm going to turn it into a blog post. But I'm going to run it maybe for 24 hours just to give you a chance to have a listen again, because the quality is really bad. And I'm a bit embarrassed about that. But what do you think, Anne-Marie, from the point of view of a PC and a Mac? What are some of the tricks we can teach the group here and share with the group about how to use a Mac and or a PC to get slightly better sound?
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember, and I was trying to rummage through my little box of doodads and dongles and everything. However, I purchased, and I don't know what you call it, but anyway, it was a connection that connected to my iPhone. And so that was one end, the iPhone connection. And on the other end, it was an XLR plug, which meant
lightning at one end.
Yeah, well, no, not lightning, because back then it didn't have lightning. It was something else, but it connected to my iPhone. So any phone connection. And on the other side, it was an XLR plug, which meant that I could plug in an XLR microphone, not a USB one. And so a pod mic, and I'm sure you would agree that when we listened to Pedro, that pod mic, it was just, I mean, obviously it helps if you've got a deep voice like Pedro has, and Tim has. You know, if you've got the deep voice, you're well ahead of the game. But I think if you can get a microphone that then plugs into your iPhone or phone, that can in effect increase the quality of your overall audio. It must do. So maybe look to see what kind of connections can I get to my phone if you don't want to spend money on a mixer or
yeah. Actually, this is a really good hack. And then I do want to throw back to Pedro, because he has this lovely resonant deep radio voice. But I've got several really important cheap hacks. I've got a piece of tech I bought at Officeworks, what the guys in America call Office Warehouse, I think. Office Depot. Office Depot. $50 it plugs into my USB mic, and at the other end it's a USB-C. So if you just go to your local Officeworks or Office Depot, there will be a number of connections that plug in from one end to the other, ranging from $20. Saves you buying a whole new piece of tech. But the question I have there is, does your mic allow you to put a headphone in so you can hear yourself? And that's a good example to bring Pedro back in. Why is that so important, mate, to actually listen to your voice on headphones?
Because you want to hear how your voice sounds so buttery to your audience. And like right now, I'm listening on my monitor headphones that I have, but you definitely want to listen to yourself to see if you're too low, listen to your levels. Are you peaking? And you're coming in really, really hot. So you want to be able to monitor that. And
could be distorted, could be thin. You want to hear the bass. You want to hear I love the word buttery. That's actually quite a lovely word.
Yeah. And Tim, a suggestion that I recently purchased, but it's more for like blogging, but I think it will work because it has a line in or a line out for you to monitor with some wired headphones. It's the Movo VXR Pro 10. It's a shotgun condenser microphone. So again, you put it on, and hook it up to your phone. Facing you, it comes with a little shock mount. It comes with the windscreen and a mouse that goes over it. And that could, get you by until you're able to level up and go to the next level of tech.
That is Movo. What? I got it. MOVA.
No, MOVO VXR Pro 10. And it's like $50 on Amazon.
Because I do want to, like Keith, I see a vision with these spaces. These spaces allow certain individuals that want to host these podcasts, that want to host these talk shows or whatever. It gives them a voice on a platform that reaches so many people. so quickly. Like you don't have to upload things to YouTube or create like something extra. Like you can just log on to Twitter and jump right in. You don't have to go through those extra processes. So I believe in it, Keith. And me and you both are.
I love what you're saying there because, look, I want to share a personal story, and this is why this is so important to me. At 16 years old, I was living in a very small town. I moved to Melbourne, which is a town of 5 million, and I went to radio school. I went 3 days a week for a year. I paid someone money to teach me to go on the radio. And I went for job after job after job, and they said, no, Keith, you're just a young kid with the wrong voice at a time when the voice is important. Go away. Go and get married, buy a house, knock yourself out, but you're never going to be on radio. Never. Don't come back. I was 16. You know, and I believed them because I was 16, and what else would I do? I tried for a year. And so in an environment in the 2020s when we can say, you know what, I'm going to run a radio show because I want to. Maybe 50 people will listen, but it's my show. I've got important things to say. We've democratized the content. I haven't got some record executive, some person in the studio And I think this is what you're saying, Tim, isn't it? That we now have the power to say, look, I've got a voice. I've got we've talked about this throughout the course of the discussion, that we need to actually share our opinions respectfully, but we need to have the power, the confidence to do that. And this is exactly what Twitter Spaces represents to me and why I've decided to get that piece of tech. I wish I had it as a 16-year-old. I wish I could have plugged it into my, into my sort of larynx and said, hey, here I am. I'm ready. I would have got a job at the rock station, but I didn't. I had to go and do other things. So, we're in a different zone in the world. We're taking charge of our own content, aren't we, Tim?
Yes, like that's it exactly. We have more power as individuals now with technology and social media. Social media is giving the people the voices that has been needed over time. And spaces like this, you're helping so many people right now. And you don't even know it. It's just the start of things. Spaces have been around, just a few months?
No, a year ago, a year on Friday.
Okay, so the anniversary wasn't too long ago.
Yeah.
You said this Friday or last Friday?
Tomorrow, a couple of days. It's been around a year. And you are right. I do appreciate what you're saying there. I know for sure we're right at the beginning, and I know what we're doing. Tomorrow, I've blocked out the whole day to make this into a blog post for my community. And if you want to know more about that, just simply go to my website, keithkeller.com.au. It's going to be on the homepage tomorrow, because I know that in a couple of months' time, someone's going to say to me, Keith, I keep hearing this thing, Twitter Spaces. What is it? No worries. I've done a show on it for you. This is the power of the educator mindset. I know Kiki gets that, yeah? You were saying something there, Indra? You're talking to the cat? I think we've got some background noise. But look, I want to keep going with the room. I know Anne-Marie needs to leave. So if anyone's got any last questions for Anne-Marie about the idea of using Twitter Spaces as a podcasting mechanism, can we jump in and get Anne-Marie while she's still here?
I haven't really had a chance. I spoke earlier a couple.
I'll just give Indra a couple of minutes to her mic sort of fluctuating there. Okay. Well, look, what I might do is I might wrap up with just a little bit of a decoder on what we're doing. Next week, Anne-Marie and I are so committed to this idea that we're running another show, last show for us this year, because it's we're coming up to Christmas. Next week, same time, same channel, we're running a show called Discover How to Use Social Audio to Build a Global Community in 2022. Now, I haven't got a link for that yet because you can only schedule one at a time. But this will indeed be a blog post coming out tomorrow. The way I've done that is I'm recording with a site called Headliner, headliner.ai. You get the recording, you get the audio, the transcript, and with a little bit of effort, you can turn them into little sound bites. to promote your show, which I know has been a really important point. So with that, I want to give everyone a chance to ask last questions if you want to. And if no one has any last questions, I want to give Anne-Marie a chance to get to her next client. She's very, very busy. She's she's a world famous podcasting expert. So please honour the fact that Anne-Marie has indeed given up her time. So
Oh, I'm not sure whether we can hear Keith or whether he's been rugged, as he normally says. So I'll just wait and see till he
there
comes
it is.
back. Oh,
Hello,
there you are.
Anne-Marie, are you there?
Yeah.
Hello, Anne-Marie, are you there?
That's good.
So
Keith,
I'm
Keith,
gonna
I just want to say one
Okay.
thing then. This is what I think Pedro was saying and a few other people were saying today, part of the conversation, when we're thinking about the opportunity that every single one of us has, no matter what pieces of technology you have with this, the Twitter Spaces and podcasting, we've got the opportunity to share our message, to share our voice, create a community of like-minded people and really start to make an impact. And I want to refer to a study that was done by Edelman, and Edelman is a global consultancy, and every year they do a poll to determine what constitutes trust. So in other words, what is needed for someone to trust? And there's different industries. Government is one, media is one, NGOs, corporate. And one of the things that they found is that as individual consumers, one of the things that we have done is decreased our trust in government and in media. And so and I would say if they do a poll now, that has probably even increased off the charts. So what that does is it gives us all an opportunity to get part of the conversation, drive the conversation. I know many people who are coaches and consultants are now sharing information that they've created and learned and developed over decades of experience to the point where they really can lead thought, become thought leaders, become change makers in their community. And so, and I share that because, so often we wait till we get all of the pieces of technology in place. But I say, get out there, share that message. You know that you can make an impact in the world with that. And then add the pieces as they go along, get the new microphone, get the new technology, but don't let that stop you from getting out there and sharing your message and building community right now, because somewhere someone needs to hear your message.
I love it. You're right. I mean, what I personally do is I buy myself a gadget once a year. This was my gadget for the year. I buy myself a piece of tech as a present to me every year at Christmas time. And I honour the fact that I love learning new things. Don't spend a zillion dollars, but I just buy something. Now my podcast will improve. I'll measure this, and then I might get a nice pair of headphones, or I might get a better mic, or I might get a bigger mixing desk. And you start where you are and you get good, and then you move ahead. Mm-hmm. And it's so good. Now, what I'm really excited about, I'm really, really excited about this, because I'm just about to wrap up to give Anne-Marie a chance to leave, is I can now play a theme song, which I found on YouTube's audio library, so it's royalty-free. And I'm just going to be able to play a little bit of theme music to wind out the show. You've been listening to Virtually Unlimited Audio. I'm Keith Keller in Melbourne, Australia. Want to find out more, go to virtuallyunlimitedaudio.com, and please follow our guest today, Anne-Marie Coach, on Twitter, and annemariecross.com if you want to find out more about how to run a podcast using Twitter Spaces or any other of the various tools. Another big round of applause for Anne-Marie, and 100, and I'll play a little bit of theme music to take us out, and I'll then go and have some lunch and enjoy my day at the beach. I'll see you later.